Welcome to the Entrepreneur Show. This is your host, Michael Marra. I'm the CEO and founder of Entre, a social network for entrepreneurs, investors, and freelancers. On this show, we interview the top CEOs, venture capitalists, angel investors, and founders. Connect with me and thousands of other like-minded people by signing up for free at joinentre.com or download our mobile app on iOS and Android. We are here with Nathan, the CEO of Foundersuite, and really excited to have you on the podcast and to interview you. You have an amazing company and amazing story. So thanks for being here, Nathan.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Awesome. Well, I want to start, if you can. You have a really interesting background. You've been a founder for a very, very long time, and you come with a wealth of knowledge and experience. So I'd love to have you start by, sharing people, really why you initially got into entrepreneurship. If there was anything growing up that led you down this route, or how did you get into this space? Because it's not, especially now, it's a little bit more, I guess, popular. But it's something that back when you were getting started in business and everything, it wasn't really that cool to do. So fill us in on that, and we'd love to hear more about your origin story.
Yeah, entrepreneurship is definitely more trendy these days. Okay. I'm going to go way back. I won't make this too long, I promise, but I'm going to go way, way back. When I was a kid, I was a total little hustler. I had a couple little side businesses. I had pretty permissive parents, and they would let me, this is going to sound really make me sound like I'm 100 years old, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. They would let me order Chinese throwing stars and blowguns and stuff out of Kung Fu magazine, the back of the magazine. They would let me order nunchucks and stuff like that. And then I would order all this crap and then sell it to other kids whose parents wouldn't let them buy this stuff. So that was maybe my first business. I remember I used to sell fireworks. We'd go up to Wyoming. I live in Colorado. We'd go up to Wyoming on a family trip, and I'd buy all these fireworks in Wyoming where they were legal all year round, then come back and sell them on the Sacred Heart school bus, to other kids. And then I guess my last little story is parents bought me a little motorcycle, little Yamaha YZ80, and I would ride it up like I'm going riding. Bye, Mom, going riding. I would ride it up. I would sit there with a book, and I would rent it out to other kids for $10 an hour, which was a lot of money when you're a little kid. And, so just kind of always hustling. And I had jars of cash in my closet. My parents were always suspicious. Where are you getting all this money? And it was just from weird little side hustles. So kind of always had a entrepreneurial bug. But then in college went down a path of investment banking. I thought, okay, I want to be an investment banker, and started to do that for a couple of years, helping companies raise capital. Worked in Piper Jaffray and JP Morgan's private placement group, which was helping later stage companies raise capital. And then, but just kind of wanted to be an entrepreneur. Didn't really fit into the investment banking world, which is a very, it's a great business to get into. You can make a lot of money doing it. It's pretty exciting, but I just didn't ever really like it, and so eventually just decided to go off and start Foundersuite basically. But after doing, fundraising for other companies for 10 years, decided, all right, why don't I build, this is what I want to be an entrepreneur. I know this space, raising capital. It's the one thing I know how to do. Why don't I build software tools kind of for that vertical? So that's the long, short version.
Yeah, no, I mean it's super, especially I love the challenge, the arbitrage of I guess you could say things that other kids couldn't get, but you could. Yeah. That's awesome. That's smart. Yeah, super, super interesting. So as you got started, as you left the investment banking world, what were and started kind of doing your own thing again and really building a larger company and going after that, what were some of the things that I guess you maybe struggled with, or what were some of those hardships that you faced at leaving the corporate world and getting into entrepreneurship? And Like, do you have any advice for people who are maybe looking at doing that now that it could be helpful for?
The whole time I was doing investment banking, I was like working in investment banking, but I also had a little journal, like writing down ideas, of startups I could start, because I just wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't have anything I was like really passionate about. And it's so kind of like obvious in hindsight. Like, it took me like 10 years to figure out, instead of coming up with like ideas in my journal about what's a better, dating app or something like that, like, why didn't I just build what I know on, scratch my own itch kind of thing, right? So that took me 10 years to figure out, like, why not just build what I'm already like proficient in and I know the pain points, right? Instead of like trying to come up. So that was one thing. I would say when I finally did kind of get out there and start, go for it, right, to be an entrepreneur. I mean, geez, coming from investment banking world or corporate world where you have so many perks, you have travel budgets, you have, you know, meal expense accounts and stuff like
Health
that.
insurance.
Insurance, all the stuff, and car service, right? If you stay late, I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff. But like, then going into entrepreneurship where there's no money, right, until you're kind of funded or you have a business. That's a shock, but that was fine, because it's just so much more fun to be building product. The one little maybe lesson, I guess you could say, for people leaving, especially if they're not a product engineer, if they're not a product designer. I was a business guy. I was an MBA, a CFA. I knew fundraising, but I went out and hired some offshore developers to start to build my MVP, and I can't believe it actually worked, because I'm a terrible product manager, right? I'm like trying to think of every bell and whistle, and it's just a mess. So I was kind of coming up with like the worst product ever. And so I think my lesson is to hire a product person, product manager. It could be a part-time consultant early on if you're not a product person, right? Because I think if you're coming from finance or the corporate world and trying to be a startup, you just want to like pack in every bell and whistle and feature request that everyone ever mentions. And we made a little bit of those mistakes until I finally got a product manager who instituted some discipline on building a product. Right.
Yeah, product is it's a very tricky thing. It's something that I've been spending a lot of time learning about for the last few years now, building this, and it's definitely not easy. And it's because it's a combination of like understand UX UI and then also having the right team and developers to actually execute on that, and in the right way that's scalable, and using the right framework so that you can add things to it easily. There's so many different variables with that. If you want to touch, because I do think product's really critical. If there's anything else that you want to touch on there, or for people who are trying to get really good at product or build out their products, like is there anything else that you would recommend there, or share about building product, or even just like user experience, like understanding customers, understanding users? Are there any lessons, tips, tricks, things that you've learned going through that? Because it's something that I'm definitely interested in too. And we're still like, always talking to our users and everything, trying to figure out what they want and all of that as well. So what other advice do you have on the product front? Because I think that's important for sure.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple almost contrasting pieces of advice, but I can give it anyway. Like, one is, I think it was Reid Hoffman that said something like, if you're not embarrassed by your first product, you waited too long to ship it, right? And I think that's actually pretty good advice, right? I think a lot of founders, myself included, made the mistake, like, we've got to make this thing perfect, so when we launch, it's a big splash and the press and everyone goes crazy for it. Well, that day your product is perfect is never, right? So like, you're never going to launch. And I've seen that happen with startups I've consulted with, where they're just constantly pushing back release date or launch date because it's just not right yet. So lesson number one is get out there with something and then start to iterate around that, right? even if it's very rough, even if it's kind of embarrassing. Our first UI was very cartoonish. I look back at it now and it looks ridiculous. It's just silly looking, but it was enough to get people understanding what we're doing and start to generating that feedback loop. So that's one thing. I'd say number two, on the feedback loop, like spend more time. This is a mistake I made. I spent too much time in my head thinking of what the product should be like, not enough time talking to customers, right? I had a vision, but I'm not always right, even though I kind of know the space of fundraising. I'm not always like one that should design this thing, right? Get out talking to customers more and more. And then the contrasting advice to that, which another mistake I made is, I talk to users and someone would say, oh, I really need to have XYZ feature on this, or it needs to have an activity feed, or it has to have this. And then I'm always going back to our engineers and saying, oh, we've got to pack this in. Can you rearrange the product schedule to pack? So it was like this zigzagging, product roadmap. And so I think the lesson I finally learned from that is like, okay, listen to everyone, but like now we do this better. We only kind of add things to our product roadmap when we're getting like repeated requests for it, right? Not every customer request or great idea that sounds great to me finds its way into the product roadmap. It's when we start to see these patterns of like, hey, 10 out of 20 people are asking for this thing. We should maybe look at that, right? So having a little more discipline around it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because we've run into this too. It's like you talk to users and then, like certain users, they're asking for this thing and it's like really important to them, but how critical is it to the other users and the thousands of other people? And is it something that you need to spend time building on? And should you prioritize that over the other things that you think people want? And that's always like the big question is like prioritization of like features and what you should be spending time building next. It's always something that we are super interested in and working towards figuring out. Once I think maybe getting to next some of like maybe like the marketing stuff.
I want to add one little thing to that before we go on to the sometimes you, and I'm sure you find this too because you have a community. Sometimes you'll find someone or who's very loud, right? And they're passionate about what you're doing. They love what you're building, and they're very strong opinionated, and they're loud. They're always just telling you, great feedback, but like you almost have to turn the volume down on those loud people too sometimes, even though you love those champions who are passionate about what you're doing, because otherwise they start to influence your roadmap too much around their specific thing. So, anyway, sorry. Just wanted to add that in there. I'm sure you have a few people in your community that are loud, right?
Yeah, 100%. And we love that they're active and engaged and passionate about what we're building. The tricky thing is, we're not just building it for them, right? And you're not just building Foundersuite for one founder. You're trying to encompass, the majority of things that founders collectively need and want, which, in your case, often is investors and money for building what they're doing. So like, I think where I wanted to go to next was more on like, okay, the marketing side of things, or how to maybe attract your first customers. Obviously, like, that's something like making money is actually, even though it's not quite as important anymore, but making money is still a vital part of entrepreneurship. And it's something that, I think, a lot of people aren't necessarily as focused on it maybe as they should be anymore, but it depends on different industries and all sorts of stuff. But how do you look at that? How do you look at, okay, we have a solid product, it's working, people are we have that initial feedback, some people are starting to pay for it, but how can we start really scaling our sales and revenue? And do you have any piece of advice on that front as far as like growing revenues and really doing marketing and continuing to scale your paid your customers, if you will?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard question. Every business, of course, is going to be a little different around this, but I think my kind of generic advice is, try everything. Try 10 different marketing experiments, um, and just start to double down on the ones that work, right? Try a whole bunch of experiments. I think we even had a little Trello board, or maybe it was a spreadsheet, I forget, where we were running a bunch of different marketing experiments, everything from paid ads to, we did events a lot in the early days, because events, believe it or not, it's hard right now with COVID, but we were putting on like 50 to 200 person events, called like startup funding 2.0 and stuff like that, right? Sort of obviously attracting people looking to raise money. We would have some speakers, everyone there, we would of course introduce our product. So paid advertising, Facebook Facebook AdWords on Google, paid events. And then in later years, we started to do a little more content marketing, I guess you could say, which is really our focus these days. We have a blog called How I Raised It, or our podcast called How I Raised It. And then we interview founders about raising capital. And then we turn that into our blog. And then we turn those into guest posts on other channels, sometimes like TechCrunch or on Hacker Noon, Medium, stuff like that. And so, and that's, I kind of like that, because that is a little more on the SEO side of things, which has a little more like long-term search, but bottom line, I think you create 10 or 12 different experiments. Doesn't have to be 12 at one time, but maybe 2 or 3 at a time. And you just start to figure out like what's working and what doesn't, and doubling down, tripling down your energy, time, and money on the ones that start to work, and you'll start to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think experimenting is a massive part of entrepreneurship and in general. And just trying a bunch of different things. And then when you do figure out, those things that do work, just keep doubling down on them and continue going forward with those. I think that's really good stuff. I think I wish more people would talk about that honestly more, because that's like I think that's like 50% of the game is just trying things constantly and experimenting and continue to learn from mistakes. Like, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Like, we've made a lot of mistakes. We're constantly iterating and trying to figure out what's going to work the best. But you don't know until you try it. Like, you don't know if TikTok's going to be great for you and your product or not, or maybe you should focus on LinkedIn or just cold email or whatever. There's all sorts of different strategies with it. So yeah, I love that. Getting into your product now and like what you're really focused on and building at the moment, and feel free to dive into Foundersuite more and what really you guys are providing for founders and others, and what you guys are, how it might be helpful for people too, because I think a lot of people listening, like, they're going to be maybe very interested in what it is. So dive into that a little bit and give people more of a background into what you're building right now.
Yeah. I'll jump back to our first, I kind of told you a little origin story, or how we got going when I was investment banking and decided to build product. Believe it or not, our first launch, our MVP, was actually a much broader focused set of tools. It's called Foundersuite. It had like an investor CRM, a PR tool for doing like your PR, had like an idea validation tool. It had like 6 different tools for founders doing all these different things, competitive tracker, all this crap. And we put it out there, and we realized that actually the only product people are really caring about is the investor CRM. Like, the other ones are like barely being used. So we kind of doubled down, tripled down on the investor CRM, which was our pipeline. You actually a little screenshot in the background of a slightly older version of it, but it's basically a software tool, kind of like a Trello board or Kanban board for managing an investor pipeline. It would replace your CRM. It would replace your spreadsheet for tracking investors, right? We launched that first, and then we've just been adding products to it every year. So then we launched a database of investors, and we have, oh, there we are. Yeah, we have about 200,000 investors in our database nowadays. So database, and then we launched an investor update tool. So that's for sending out like a regular company newsletter to your investors or to prospective investors. Then we launched a pitch deck hosting tool, kind of like a DocSend or Google Slides, right? Just a place to put up your pitch deck, send it out to investors, and track who's viewing it. Our homepage is a little old. I think we need to update it. We've been like, our product roadmap has been going faster than our homepage updates. But what else? Then we launched the email tool. So just a tool for doing like ongoing communications, follow-up emails with investors at scale. And then most recently, we launched a data room. That's not even on the homepage yet, but it's like 2 weeks old. So we launched a virtual data room, which is what you put all your confidential documents in. Then you can put it out to investors and track and see who's downloading it, who's sharing it, stuff like that. So kind of zooming out for a minute, if you think about how fundraising works, right? First step is to build a target list of investors. So that's what you would use the investor database for. Second step is really kind of managing all the activities, actions, tasks, follow-up action items that have to happen. That's what the CRM is for. And then for the communications, the ongoing, like sending out your pitch deck, sending out your company updates, sending out follow-up emails. That's what pitch deck, investor updates, and the email tool is for. And then finally, once you get into due diligence, that's where the data room comes into place. So if you kind of think about how a capital raise process goes from like zero, step by step, we're building tools for each step along the way. So that's basically what it does.
Yeah, super smart. I didn't realize you wrote out some of these new things recently. I love it because the biggest issue, and I've gone through this, like we've raised money, we're in the process right now of closing out our seed round and stuff too. And it's a lot. Like all the things that you hinted on are the things that you're going through on a constant basis as a founder, right? You're going to have to do a lot of investor research first and foremost. Like we use mostly, like I use mostly like Airtable, and then we have like Crunchbase and all of that, but you solve that problem. Then like when you have when you're actually going through the fundraising, you need a data room, you need a pitch deck. So most people use DocSend and stuff like that. Then you need to send out your investor update emails. Most people just use just through their email, but it doesn't necessarily look all that great. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I think you're solving a lot of problems there. What are you seeing, with all the founders that you guys work with? What are you seeing as, still some of these, pain points and or things that, are there any insights that I'm sure you're getting a lot of data and information from all of this? Like, is there any insights there as to maybe the things that entrepreneurs are still necessarily not doing great, or maybe even are doing really well, that you've seen like a common thread with, like, founders that, reach out to investors in this way, or use this template, or, follow up twice or something like that? Have you uncovered any insights there with all the data that's going on through your different software?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give you kind of one or two pain points, and then maybe my favorite sort of best practice that we're seeing founders do. On the pain point, it's still very painful and time consuming to build a target list of investors. It just is. You can use our database, you can search around in it, you can use Crunchbase and PitchBook, and there are other databases out there. But still just takes a lot of time to really research and identify the right investors. Even if you have advanced search, and we've got decent search, it still just takes a while, because you kind of have to like look at each investor individually and qualify them, make sure they have not invested in a competitor, make sure they're doing your stage, your your industry. You have to kind of like do that research. So there's no real shortcut to that. I would say where people sometimes make a mistake is they do try and shortcut it. Like when I get our users saying, hey, you've got 5,000 investors under SaaS in your database. How do I just download that whole list and blast them an email? I'm like, no, you can't, because that's not how it works. You shouldn't do that. That's going to hurt you. So what sort of a mistake and founders make is just trying to shortcut that and not doing the research and qualifying those target investors. So that's one thing. It's still a pain point to find an introduction path. Fundraising really runs best when you get a mutual introduction or someone connecting you to investors. I know that's difficult for people to get, but there are ways around that. We just did a funding hacks talk, and I talk about some ways to get those connections, get those introductions, even if you don't have a huge network, which happy to talk more about. But that's still a pain point, right? So you have to kind of network and hustle your way to an intro. I mean, that's why sites like, join Entre or Entre is great, because there's a community which you can kind of lean on and socialize those connection paths, right? So that's one pain point. The thing I see, my favorite funding hack, and the thing I see a lot of our customers do really well is simply like this, right? You build a list of investors, maybe it's 100, 200, whatever. You reach out to them with a cold email, and we have a little template in our email tool, but with a cold email saying something like, hey, my name is Michael. I'm going to be raising, I run Entre. It's a community with, thousands and thousands of passionate entrepreneurs. We just closed our seed round. I'm going to be raising my Series A in September of 2022. I see you've invested in XYZ. I send out a monthly update, one page, very short. Can I have your permission to add you to our distribution list so you get a sneak peek or early access to what I'm building here? Basically, and you're not cold emailing investors for their money. You're emailing them, asking to give you permission to add them to your distribution list. And then you start sending them a monthly update, very short, one page or less, with like a little bit about what you're doing, key wins and highlights, progress, stuff like that, maybe some metrics, your team, and you send that for 4 or 5 months in a row. They see what you're working on, and they see your progress. You see you're executing well, you're spending that seed money efficiently. And then come, September, when you're about to fundraise, maybe in August, you send out an update saying, hey, we're just about to kick off our Series A. Our metrics have grown to this. Would you like early access to our pitch docs? And it's a way of kind of like preempting around. I just love it. I've seen hundreds of startups do this well, and the deals sometimes get like done before they even like go out to fundraise. So that's my favorite little best practice. Yeah.
I think it's super, super smart. I think it's something that I've done a lot of myself, is even if I'm talking to an investor and they're like, hey, it's not a fit for us right now, or whatever that may be, even if it's a no, every single time I'm like, hey, is it okay if I add you to our investor update emails? Or would it be okay, or do you want to be added to our investor update emails to stay in touch? Or something like that. Or even is there any other investors that that might be interested too? Because the thing about investors is a lot of them work together on a lot of deals, and a lot of them know other investors where it might not be a fit for them, but another investor that they know it might be interesting for. So it never hurts to ask. And the hardest part is just getting that introduction, getting the conversation with the investor first. And once you have that communication line open, leverage it, ask, don't over ask, like don't be aggressive with it, and don't be constantly, bantering them and emailing them and whatnot. But almost every investor for the most part, is open to being included in an investor update email or something along those lines, and making introductions if it makes sense. A lot of them don't do anything, but you never know who someone will introduce you to that might not even be on your radar.
But if you're, yeah, I love that, because even if they said no, okay, we're not a great fit or you're too early for us, but they'll give you permission to keep them on your update list, and then they see you making progress. They still might be a no, but they're like, hey, these guys actually are kicking ass. Michael with his Entre is doing amazing things, and it always makes them look good if they're referring deals to other investors, right? There's a sort of horse trading or whatever, right? So they might forward it on later because they're impressed by your progress and your traction. That's just how deals work. So yeah, it's definitely a really good thing to do.
Yeah, no, I think it's big. I think it's something that I think more people should do. We're gonna get. I haven't done an investor update actually in a little bit, just because we're in the middle of some big updates on our end. So I want to kind of wait until those are over. But yeah, I think it's huge. Definitely something. Any other fundraising tips or strategies that you think people should be doing or looking into? And as we wrap up here or get close to wrapping up, if anyone in the audience has any questions for Nathan, please drop them in the room chat, and we can get to those as well in these last few minutes here. But any other, piece of advice, fundraising wise, or even just building the company in general, right? Like that you might have for people as they're starting to, take that next step in the building of a business process.
Yeah, I think the advice I'm going to give applies almost equally to whether you're going to fundraise or just building your company. And that's kind of just, this karma bank concept of, even if you're still working your corporate job or day job, or you're working at Google right now and you haven't left to go start a startup yet, just sort of paying it forward and being helpful, right? Being helpful to other people in the community, being helpful to other entrepreneurs, being a sounding board to, if you're a design person, giving other startups feedback on their designs, on their pitch decks, whatever it is, sort of building up this good karma that will then help you when it's time to fundraise and you've got to now call in a bunch of favors. And it shouldn't be like, hey, I did you a favor, now you owe me a favor. It's not a direct, one-to-one like trade, right? But it's more just like, I like to think like when I was consulting the startups and helping them raise capital for 10 years before launching my own, I was doing a lot of just coaching people on their pitch, or just doing a lot of kind of just stuff for free, not getting paid for it, and just helping people out in the community. And I feel like I built up a lot of that sort of goodwill, which then when it was time to launch my own business, I could kind of lean on people, and people were really, really helpful. So, basically the bottom line is just like get out there and pay it forward, be helpful to others, even if you don't see any immediate way you're going to get a return on that, right? Because it's not about that. And, just kind of just pay it forward, right? And it will come back to you when you're either ready to launch your startup or go raise capital. You need some introductions. So simple as that.
Yeah, I love it. I think I like to look at it as planting seeds, because you never know when they're going to grow or how big they're going to grow or any of that. But yeah, I love just like planting seeds. Everywhere, and you never know what it will grow into or turn into. But yeah, I love that. Mark, I know you had your hand raised. If you have a question, drop it in the room chat. We're not going to bring anyone up on stage here just because it's being recorded. And we don't want to mess up the video. But if you have a question, drop it in the room chat there, or anyone else for that matter. And then Nathan, as we get wrapped up, where's the best place for people to follow up with you? Where's the best place for people to learn more, or if they have any questions about Foundersuite or anything else that you're doing? Where should people learn about that and learn more about yourself?
Yeah. Load if you're just check out foundersuite.com, www.foundersuite.com. Pretty easy to find. There is a free version of our platform. So if you want to just poke your head in, and it doesn't include all the tools, but it's free forever, no credit card. And oh yeah, there it is. Thank you. You can do some searches on the database. You can upload your pitch deck. You can create an investor update so you can start to get a feel for it. The thing I would plug, if I may, is our podcast. I mentioned it. It's called How I Raised It. Just search on How I Raised It on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever. And it's just good. I thought I knew everything about raising capital until I started doing the podcast, and I learned so much more than I ever had, envisioned. Like so many just different ways to raise capital. So it's just a wealth of info. But yeah, and Twitter at Foundersuite. If you have questions, you can email me at nathan@foundersuite.com. Pretty easy to remember. And that's it. I'm happy to answer I'm pretty much a one-trick pony. I can talk about fundraising and not much else. But if you have fundraising questions,
I love it. Well, yeah, once our rounds wrapped up, it'd be cool to talk about that as well on there. Was there any?
Yeah, maybe we can get you on the podcast. Talk about if you got some interesting stories.
For sure. Fun. Was there any big, if there's one or two big things that you mentioned, you learned a bunch of new things about fundraising? Was there any one or two big aha moments, or kind of just totally different ways of thinking about it that blew your mind that might be helpful for people?
It kind of touches on what I talked about a little bit already. I had no idea how many the deals that were getting done really fast, right? The founders that were raising money in 6 weeks or whatever had done kind of that nurturing thing I talked about, where they had, started dialogues with investors 6 months, even a year in advance, and kind of nurtured those relationships, both through doing the investor updates and, occasional coffee meetings or whatever, just to update them. But the sort of pre-work before the fundraising, I had no idea how much of a big factor that was, especially for the hot deals. Every hot deal had been nurtured for a year in advance or 6 months in advance, right? That was surprising to me. And then I think just, again, I sort of thought there was one way to do fundraising. And then I realized I had a guy on the show not too long ago that his whole strategy was to kind of work different angel groups. He would go around to different angel groups, and there's a whole bunch of strategies around that. So the bottom line is there's lots of different ways to raise capital, even though there are some kind of core common concepts. So yeah,
for sure. I think I think a lot of it's based on relationships, for sure, especially early on. Is one of the things that I've noticed, most definitely. And I think definitely check out foundersuite.com, everyone. Check out the podcast. Connect with Nathan. He obviously, if you've been listening, he comes with a wealth of knowledge, and they're working on some really cool stuff over there. And Nathan, really, really appreciate your time, man. And hopefully we can definitely want to figure out ways of collaborating and working together going forward as well. So keep me in the loop with everything that you have going on, and if we can be helpful with our network, let me know.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, and drop me a line when the seed rounds, the ink is dry and all the T's crossed and I's dotted on that, and let's talk about that too. That'd be fun. So
fantastic. Let's do it.
Thank you for having me.
Nathan, really appreciate it, man. Take care. Have a great evening. And thanks everyone for tuning in. If you have any questions, want to learn more about everything that we're doing, just go over to joinentre.com, and appreciate you if you're checking out the podcast. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Entrepreneur Show. If you'd like to connect and network with other like-minded people, entrepreneurs, investors, freelancers, and startups, check out our app or go to our website, joinentre.com.
Thank you so much for being a part of our community. If there's anything that we can do to help you, please reach out to us and let us know.